Hello there. Aye, let's have a wee chat today. I'm going to tell you about my life on the doorstep. Now, I've been a door-to-door salesman and social researcher for a lot of years, over 20 years now, and believe me, I've met a lot of people. One of the nicest compliments I was ever given was by a top businessman who said I was a craftsman with people. I never forgot that, and probably to a certain extent, without being too modest, is probably true. I just have this natural thing of being able to chat away to people. My wife would cringe in a corner when we were talking away to strangers, but I just blather away as if I knew them yesterday. And blather, by the way, is a Scottish word for chatting away. Now, some of the people I've met over the years have been absolutely fascinating. I remember chatting to one Glasgow detective, and he was telling me a story about the drug-running kids. Kids who were getting funded by a pub in Glasgow, and they were taken down to the Disney World in Paris area, and then the bus was going off down to Spain and coming back up and loading itself with drugs. Go a bit more into that story some other time perhaps, but that's just one of the Another one interesting lady I met was the Victorian lady. This was a lady who lived in the Victorian times. Her whole house was down out in Victorian memorabilia, and it was absolutely fascinating to go into this house. Although she had some modern stuff downstairs, her house was completely Victorian upstairs, and quite an island, shall we say. But in the job, I did a lot of work within social crime research, and I worked in the Scottish Crime Survey for a lot of years. And as you can imagine, you met all walks of life in that one. Some were really sad ones, some were funny ones. The thing about it was really that you could be talking one day in the morning to somebody who had their garden gnomes pinched in the morning. To them that was a major disaster, and in the afternoon I was talking to a lady whose her nephew had been murdered. His girlfriend, he'd split up with his girlfriend who was taking all his money 2 or 3 months before now. She decided to get her own back and got some heavy, stick him around and beat him up and threw him out of the kitchen window. The kitchen window also happened to be 3 stories up. Sadly, the lad died about 6 hours later. But that's the sort of things that the day you had on the crime survey, and I've been talking to ex-prisoners. The other interesting way I once talked to was a relative who had been on the Titanic. Her grandfather had been on the Titanic, and that was an interesting story. And some of the things that shocked me about that, the Titanic, were how the wages stopped at the hour that the ship sank, and they raised tremendous amount of money at the time. But a really fascinating lady to meet her. But the one skill I developed with all this was being able to talk to people, and from all walks of life. And I've talked from the very bottom to the very top. I've interviewed managing directors, chairmen of top international companies, and equally I've chatted to people who are struggling away, earning a crust of bread like myself. My real skill came into very early days when a guy called Tim Ryan. Now, Tim was a one-time priest, and he ended up in the motor trade, and he always said he went from a saint to a sinner, really. But of all the different courses I went and all the different people I met, Tim was the one who taught me the skills of communicating with people. He had a fantastic memory for people, and he was really, really good with them. And I was young then. I was only in my early 20s when Tim first came onto the scene, but he was really quite a character, and he showed me a lot of things about the living as a salesman. He wrote everything down, and the next time, 6 months later, he went back to see him. Tim was chatting away to the people, and he remembered the dog had been in the vets, and his daughter had been married, or the postman ran away with his mistress, and all this kind of stuff. But the one thing Tim taught me was that he just had that craftsman with people, because from my first call on the very first day out with him, we went into this lorry place in Middlesbrough area, and the guy said, "F off, get F off, your stuff was crap." And to my utter amazement, Tim agreed with the guy, and as I went on, I realised that Tim wasn't quite as daft after all, because he sat there agreeing and all the rest of it. And just about as we were about to go, Tim spotted the old motorbike in the far corner, and he said to the guy, "Could we go over to the corner and have a look at this motorbike? Because I'm really interested in old classic bikes." And all that. So, "Oh yes, of course you can." Off he goes, and half an hour later we came up with £1,000 order. That £1,000 in the 1970s was a lot of money. But it taught me the skills of how to handle people, or turn bad situations into good ones. And I say all the different times I went out with different people, Tim was the real craftsman, and he taught me the craftsmanship of talking to people. And since then I have talked and interviewed thousands since, and I always remember how Tim approached things. Well, one of the things, well, I do run courses from time to time with a friend of mine who just help people to talk to strangers, communicate with people, because obviously I'm doing it all day and every day, and made a living at it. And now we're running courses on that, and it's amazing. I walk into a classroom situation and very few people are talking to each other, whereas I find it very, very strange, because I was sat in that room with total strangers. I was sitting chatting away to somebody about the weather, the dog, or whatever. But of course, in today's world, people don't communicate like they used to. They do it electronically. They don't go for the face-to-face meetings and all the rest as they do now. Anyway, that's been a little insight to some of the people that I've met. I say there's been hundreds of fascinating people I've met over time. And then one of these days I'm going to write a book about all the different people. And some sad stories, as I said, some good stories. The TV producer was another fascinating guy. He was well in his 70s, and he was talking to he was on the phone when I got there, and he was talking to these people on the, he was talking to, I didn't know at the time, but he was talking to Glenda, and how are you doing, Glenda, blah, blah, the rest of it. That turned out to be Glenda Jackson. And it was really quite an inside story to some of the things that went on. He worked on all creatures, great and small. And one of the funniest stories that comes to my mind at the moment, he was in the story they were trying to get this horse to wink. Now, of course, this is a ridiculous scenario, really. But what they did do, and behind the cameras, they got something with a bicycle pump, and they pumped this into the side of the horse's eye, and of course the horse blinked. But it appeared on the TV as the horse was actually blinking, and that was some of the stories that he came up with. And he often says actors would go in for jobs and that, and say could they ride a horse, and of course they always said yes they could. He says some of them couldn't, even though they had super glue in their pants, they couldn't stay on a horse, but they were so desperate to get the job that they would see anything to get the part. This is just a taster of the people that I've met over the years, and one of the things that comes to mind is the one about the lady who was a miracle. I once witnessed a miracle, and I must tell you a story before I go. This was a lady who was in her early 20s, and me and a colleague were interviewing her, and she was complaining that she couldn't walk, she was on crutches and all the rest of it, unable to walk anywhere. But lo and behold, after half an hour talking to her, and all the ails and all the rest of it she had, we left her. And about 10 minutes later, we were sat in our car filling up our report and all the rest of it, and sure and behold, we saw this lady hobbling down the street on the crutches. And then suddenly a bus appeared, and obviously she was out to catch the bus, so she picked up the crutches, and like a miracle, she picked up the crutches and ran for the bus. And that was the one only time I obviously witnessed a miracle. Now, whether it was a miracle or whether she was, pulling things along, you can work out for yourself. But I think I tend to support the latter then. But it was a miracle to witness at that time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this wee chat, and as I said, my name's Alan Johnston, and life on the doorstep's been interesting, and it's certainly taught me to be a craftsman with people. Bye.